With the release of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, we've now gotten over 100 brand new Pokemon designs. As with every single generation, the new Pokédex is a mixed bag of both good and bad designs. While I think pretty much all Pokemon from this new mix are actually pretty solid in terms of concept, the execution is far from perfect in many cases, with simplistic, overly abstract, or just plain awkward visuals. So my goal today is to take 5 Pokemon that I think feel most undercooked, for lack of a better word, and add a little bit of spice to each of their designs to round it out in a way that I think improves them on a case-by-case basis. This might include changing anything about its visuals, meaning its color or its body type, but I will always honor its original concept. I can't get rid of, but only expand upon what we've already been given. That's the one rule here. Anything else is fair game. Of course, I'm far from a perfect artist, much less in a style that could be perceived as the official Pokemon artwork, so please note that each of these designs features semi-expanded concepts that I will discuss in detail when showcasing my versions. So even if my execution isn't perfect, you can at least see how I'm justifying my redesigns through words. Without further ado, let's redesign some Pokemon. First up, why don't we take a look at one of the biggest missed opportunities in Paldea, and the one that actually inspired me to work on this video, Shroodle. This design is obviously a pre-evolution to Grafaiai, one of my absolute favorites from the region, but I honestly didn't even know it when I first looked at Shroodle. You're a disgrace. Just kidding, but Shroodle does feel painfully undercooked, to use our word of the day, in many cases. Firstly, it's a way too abstract design in every area. It doesn't really have much of a concept that leads us into Grafaiai, just that it kind of secretes poison from its tongue, but the tongue isn't particularly prominent. It does admittedly draw from the Kilroy is here World War II era graffiti, but come on, that's not a concept, that's a visual inspiration, and it's not a particularly flattering one. It's built like a cylinder, and it has a ridiculously bulbous nose that really detracts from any personality that you could get from a more even face, like Grafaiai and its awesome pupilless eyes. So what are we gonna do to fix it? Well, let's give it a proper concept first and foremost. Perhaps we can draw upon what it's supposed to be, a mouse lemur, you know, like Mort from Madagascar. So changing the face and proportions to be something that's mainly more similar to Grafaiai, while also generally more appealing, is a big goal here. We can also make it so Shroodle has more of a nice transformation into a refined graffiti artist when it evolves, so this form can be pretty messy and covered in toxic paint. So here's my version of Shroodle. As you can see, this is very clearly a baby lemur, with a long tail and big ears, so it looks more like its evolution, but less edgy. I went for all rounded edges on this guy for the contrast. You can see it instead of generic bulbous eyes. It has the freaky lenses of Grafaiai, which I think adds a whole lot of personality that was missing. I also gave it the same snout and the white markings on the face, not only to add more detail and make it look like Grafaiai's relative, but also because I think the white rounded face can either look like a skull to allude to its poison typing, or it can look like an exposed face when it's wearing a hoodie, similar to many graffiti artists. Speaking of clothes, I also used Grafaiai's slightly gray discoloration on the bottom once again to look like painter's overalls, or perhaps a toddler's onesie. That way this is a clear young painter who's not afraid to get dirty. Rather than excrete poison directly from its tongue, I imagine that this Pokemon licks its paws to cover them in its toxic paint-like saliva, then finger paints all over whatever it pleases, perhaps covering its tail in globs of paint, and its bottom half gets absolutely covered. Because, you know, babies are messy and sticky. Gross. Anyway, I think that this was a pretty successful redesign overall. I wanted something more clearly related to Grafaiai, something more clearly monkey-like, and something much more personality-driven. I think we succeeded on all fronts, but let me know. Now let's turn to another common Pokemon in the region, Spidops. Unlike Shroodle and the rest of the Pokemon in this video, I didn't look at Spidops and think of any one thing in particular that really needed to be fixed. It just kind of felt off. So I looked at it, and I looked at it, And that's when I realized that, yeah, Spidops is a Pokemon with an okay concept, but a pretty weak execution. Not much more to it. Simply put, this Pokemon just kinda looks awkwardly plastic for no good reason. I know the legs are bundled together like real-life ogre spiders, but come on, this is a Pokemon. I'm willing to cut realism and 8 legs for something more streamlined. Maybe 6-legged? I also think that it's a missed opportunity that this Pokemon doesn't emphasize its strings quite enough, especially in the limbs. I mean, instead of pool noodles, what if these legs were more pointed and sharp, so they'd look like sewing or knitting needles, and further enhance the fierceness that I think this design needs. I know it sews, but this isn't someone's grandma. This is Spidops, a military special ops web weaver. Make the face cool too, right? So with those changes in mind, here's Spidops Tam's version. A design that keeps the exact same proportions and colors as the original, since those worked great, and simply fix the limbs so they look more menacing and could feasibly pierce an opponent in close range combat or spin a pretty nasty web. I also added fur to the beige parts under the arms, further to give this Pokemon realistic detail for a bug type design. I also kept the yarn spindle underneath pretty much unchanged, since it's pretty genius. I just made it a bit shorter so it's less accentuated. And it's more proportional and rounded like a real spider's thorax. Lastly, I fixed up the face to look a bit more menacing, but also kind of endearing, with rounded eyes and a rounded head. I think bug-type designs really shine when they look more animalistic, free from heavy-handed concepts, especially humanoid ones. So I chose not to go for a camo pattern or actual sewing needle arms. Not even the special ops goggles that I think the original eyes were going for. It's a pretty simple redesign, but I think it got the job done. Sometimes you don't need to swing for a home run, you just have to settle for a base hit, especially for a Route 1 bug type evolution, and this redesign was a good lesson in that philosophy. Next up, we are working with a Pokemon that I certainly have far more issues with, Scovillain. The first grass and fire type was hugely disappointing to me for many reasons. I mean, you're already making a weird Pokemon, a uniquely typed, two-headed pepper monster. That's great. So why is it on a plain humanoid and frankly, Generation 1 caliber body with absolutely no detail? It's not only jarring from the bright personality-driven faces, but it's also a disservice to the concept's coolness. The faces are completely fine, so we'll keep those, but I do dislike minor things on this design, like the fact that the red stands out way too much, because everything else here is a different shade of green. I mean, literally everything. So why not get more bold and create a tricolor pepper, one that uses yellow as well? It seems too obvious, and it annoys me that they didn't even try it. With all that in mind, here's my version of Scovillain. Like I said, the main difference here is that this is a full-fledged dragon now, rivaling Hydreigon in fierceness. We get a long tail with 3 main pepper colors, larger legs, and a nice big stomach that completely gets rid of those tiny little hands that the original design has. I believe that if you're designing a Pokemon and there's a feature that doesn't add anything to the concept or personality, just cut it. So that's what I did here. Instead, I added a nice base of flowers, almost like the heads are sprouting from the body organically on a much thicker stalk, not a thin little thing. I also made the heads yellow and red rather than green and red, just for more visual balance up top with 2 warm colors. These are spicy peppers and a fire type for crying out loud. So the more warm colors we have, the better. I also added some leaves behind the face just for some added detail and balance. That way the design wasn't too bottom heavy. With the 2 heads, dragon look, and leaf feathers behind the head, it almost reminds me of Hydreigon, but I think it stands out well enough. Let me know what you think. The next redesign goes to yet another Pokemon just like Scovillain, one that I think could have been really cool and a true home run, but instead was an awkward half-hearted attempt. I am of course talking about Baxcalibur, a design that I think is amazing in concept due to its simplicity, but really struggles in execution because of that simplicity. I dislike how this Pokemon is so plain, almost looking like a bald rubber toy, when it's a dragon and ice type. 2 types known for their complex patterning and typically rougher, more jagged, and segmented appearances. I also don't like how it looks like a steel type. The ice face and back are way too simplistic, and it makes it look like armor when it should be jagged crystals of ice, similar to its pre-evolutions. I know the name Baxcalibur is cool, but we don't literally need a sword in the stone or a knight's shield kind of look on the back, especially since it doesn't factor in its 2 pre-evolutions. It just kind of comes out of nowhere. Speaking of which, why are these guys so animalistic, and Arctibax is hunched over like a Spinosaurus, just to stand back upright again? I know it's meant to look like a dude inside of an old kaiju movie suit like Godzilla, but we already got that with Tyranitar and Duraludon. Why make a lesser version here when we could have a true Spinosaurus Pokemon? With all that in mind, here is my Baxcalibur, a chunky, rugged Spinosaurus through and through. Its proportions are fixed, to make it more on the Tyrantrum side of dragons than the Duraludon side. This guy is bulky yet ready to strike, not topple over. I also added basic lines across all of its limbs, stomach, and tail, so it looks more draconic and segmented in a way that I think was missing. A simple fix sometimes goes a long way. I also loved the ice face and back, but slightly changed up the colors and of course the shapes to look more like bulky glaciers or icicles, rather than an artificial mask or a shield. Now instead of an awkwardly outward backplate, it has the full-fledged sail of a Spinosaurus that extends from neck to tail. This is verging on fossil Pokemon territory given the inspiration, but I think it still works as a satisfying and believable evolution to Arctibax as a pseudo-legendary. I also brought in more of the red from the forearm sleeve claw things, and I made them appear on the belly and on the side of the body, almost like a thermometer. A pretty neat detail, I think, for an ice type. What do you think of this design overall? Finally, we've got one more design. And guys, I have to admit, I cheated here. Earlier in the video, I said I would only redesign a Pokemon's visuals, given the framework of what we already know. I'm in the business of redesigning Pokemon, not inventing brand new evolutions and steamrolling what we were already given. But honestly, I really didn't like Gholdengo. I don't know why, and I hate that I feel this way. I love goofy Pokemon and I love ghost types, but this is a bit too far, I think. As many have noted, this guy looks more like the mascot to a cereal or a string cheese than a haunted coin entity. Of course I like the fact that he's now made out of coins rather than living in them, but we need more of an iteration from Gimmighoul personality-wise. Something that would probably go from greedy to full-on menacing, ready to defend its treasure at any cost. So forget the Pokedex that says that Gholdengo is friendly towards people. Lastly, can we better incorporate the chest? With all that in mind, here is my version of Gholdengo, a true mimic chest Pokemon. This Pokemon likely folds itself into the snapped-off top half of the chest, peering out of the center amulet with its ghostly gaze, and then springing into action with a body made of 1,000 coins. I think this face being the chest is the big difference here, and I opted for no teeth despite the fact that this is a traditional mimic chest like you would see in a D&D campaign. I kept the rubbery look at the limbs because I think that conveys motion amazingly, like this is a flowing mass of coins that can outstretch itself and even run to grab any foe. No coin surfboard necessary. I mean, this is a ghost type, right? So I think we needed something spooky, something that would chase you down a crypt. I also don't have too much else to add despite how proud I am of this redesign, honestly. I really did try to keep a friendlier demeanor, but I think that this is a rare total misfire from the Paldea region that would be better with a completely new personality. With all that, we have officially touched up 5 Pokemon from the Paldea region, reworking their appearances, expanding their concepts, and even taking some liberties with their personalities to make what I would think would be stronger entries that people would like a lot better. But of course, these are just my ideas. Let me know yours down below. I want to thank everyone who supports the channel through my Patreon, especially Guardian patron Skelletubby. If you want to support the channel further, please go check out the Tam Valley Patreon, where you can get cool perks like shoutouts and videos, an exclusive flair and channel on the Tam Valley Discord, and even a custom Fakemon commission from me. If that interests you, please go check out the link below, because every little bit of support would be incredible as we continue to grow the channel. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time for more content.